and that means it's Disputed Lands on Take on the World TV. You can see, hopefully, you're seeing more. I've got stuff to figure out here with my camera. I didn't have my controls. I'm using a different. Whoa! Where's that coming from? I gotta mute this over here. Okay, sorry. I got things to work out. First, I want to say welcome to my guest. You're going to see him here in a minute. I got Carl Teichrib. I got Audrey RV and her husband, Kevin. They're both going to be joining us here in live shortly to talk about Burning Man. But before I do that, just before the show, I saw a message. I had talked with you guys last week about getting StreamYard, the upgraded version. I got an email from a donor who would like to remain anonymous. A donor who would like to remain anonymous, who is going to donate so that I have StreamYard for the year. Bless them. But so without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in, and I'm going to bring in my guests here, which are Audrey RV, her husband, and Carl Teichrib. His name is Kevin, by the way.
Oh, no, Brian.
You guys may have to squeeze closer together until I figure this out. Maybe if I do this. Oh, there we go. We go. Now you can see all of us.
Brian.
Did I see? I keep saying Kevin. Where did I get Kevin?
That's my husband.
I don't know. So Kevin/Brian is joining us as well. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to have, for those of you who are brand new, you saw the title. You know, a lot of you, most of you probably do know what Burning Man is, or you got an idea. But we always get new listeners. And we got people going, what in the heck? This doesn't sound Christian. What is it? So we're going to have Carl tell us and run down the inception of Burning Man, what it's about, what happens there, and we'll go from there. So Carl, you go ahead and you take us away with that.
All right. Thank you, Chad. And thank you for allowing Brian, Audrey, and myself to be on your program today. For those who don't know what Burning Man is, it is a massive gathering in the desert of northern Nevada, the Black Rock Desert. And annually, it is the construction of a city. This year was roughly 80,000 people who constructed and participated in the city known as Black Rock City, the home of Burning Man. And at the end of a week of celebration, a week of party, a week of networking and collaborating, coming together, they burn a massive human effigy. And it's a huge human effigy placed usually on a base. And then they have a temple, and during the course of the week, the temple becomes a place for people to reflect, to mourn, to grieve. It's a place of sorrow. It's a place of trying to find healing. And then on Sunday, the day after they burn the man, then the temple is ignited and burnt to the ground too. There's a lot of art. There are a lot of art installations and art pieces. There are various shrines. The place is a do-it-yourself city. It is completely developed by the volunteers who make this happen. It does have an organization behind it, but the reality is it's the people who attend who make the event into what it is. The place is very spiritual. All throughout it, you'll find shrines, you'll find messaging talking about how we're all one. You'll find a lot of references to the goddess. You'll find a lot of references to things that we would recognize as being New Age concepts or pagan Wiccan concepts. You'll find some of that too. And it's noted for its sexuality. It's noted for its sensuality. And when you look at the articles that come out about Burning Man, that's usually what people focus on. In fact, you'll find articles like 70,000 naked hippies in the desert having an orgy. No, number one, they're not they're not hippies. And in a show that Brian, Audrey, and myself did with Basil, while we were at the burn, Basil made the point, look, this is more nudity than what you expect, or pardon me, than what you're used to, but it's less than what you expect. It's not a church event, okay? This is not a place where you should bring your children, although there's a lot of kids at the burn, all right? There's a lot. And demographically, all ages are represented. I believe the medium age is 34 years old. It definitely attracts young professionals, people especially involved in the tech industry. You are, like I said, you are not not interacting with hippies. You'll spend time with people who are entrepreneurs. I spent 2 hours talking with the European Union liaison to the U.S. federal government. This year we had Nobel Prize winning economist who's an advisor at the World Bank. You have congressmen. This year we had 52 mayors from the U.S. Conference of Mayors visiting the city. This is not just a crazy party in the desert. This is a place of networking. This is a place of spirituality. This is a place for social change.
Wow. I don't know why I didn't put this together, but when you were given the description of that initially, what came to mind to me is the original definition of what used to be carnival.
That's right. Yes.
Because that's truly what it is. It's a carnival.
Right. The original description or definition.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
In fact, Chad, I bring that up in my book. I do bring that up in my book.
I haven't read it all.
Well, check out chapter 14 because it goes into the purpose and meaning of carnival, and attaches that to what happens at Burning Man and other events like that within this community. Because Burning Man is just one event of many events. So yes, excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. That was excellent.
That just, I don't know, it just hit me. Well, you must be onto something. Now, with that being said, it looks like Ian's getting ready to join us here, so we're going to add him in. But before we get there, welcome Ian. Just mute your mic if you could for me a second, because I'm getting some back feed there. He's my new co-host, by the way, guys. If you haven't seen him or met him yet, this is Ian Fiduccia, also known as Ian Fiduccia, as I affectionately call him, the Almighty Duck. But Audrey and Brian, so you guys have known Carl for years and have been familiar with this work. However, and you've been familiar with his ministry that he's done by going to the burn. However, this was a new experience for you guys, right? Am I right in saying this was the first year that you and your husband and Brian have attended?
This is the first year that Brian and I have attended the big Burning Man event, but we have been to other events with Carl. We went to a regional burn in our country. We've been to the Parliament of World Religions, Area 51, things like that with Carl. So we're very familiar with what Carl does and love his research and his ministry. So, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, and then Ian, if you think of other questions I'm missing, feel free to chime in and let me know as we're going along here, brother. My new co-host, he and I got to get used to working with each other, so you guys are test subjects, by the way. So I want to get each of you to tell me, first of all, the preparation leading up to this, how it came about, all of that. Just give me those, and each of you can give me your thoughts on those separately.
All right. Well, Audrey started off by doing a ton of research, reading and watching everything she could see on YouTube, for 3 or 4 months when this idea came in her head. And she worked hard at it. And I'm thinking, well, we're not going to get tickets anyway. I'm not really going to work that hard. So anyway, and then when we got tickets, and I did do stuff along the way, but I probably didn't take it as serious as I should. And then all of a sudden we got tickets for some unknown reason. And the fear really set in, panic set in, and you really got to make things happen quickly. And it was stressful because of the conditions there. And I didn't really realize how serious it was until we were actually there driving in. And all of a sudden I cannot see a foot in front of my truck because the wind is blowing and the sand is there, and I couldn't see anything. I'd stop the truck and just hope nobody ran into us. It was worse than a snowstorm up here in the frozen north. So that's my on it.
Did it take the paint off the vehicle with that sand blowing and everything?
I wasn't blowing that hard to sandblast your vehicle, but the thing is, it really is alkalide. So if you don't, if it gets wet on your truck, it's gonna stain it. And we've noticed that already. The lag bolts I screwed into the ground, they were foot-long lag bolts, screwed them in to hold the tent down, and they were plated. And when I took them out, after being in there a week, they were already starting to rust and corrode, and the plating was gone off them. So
wow.
It is pretty intense. So I'd recommend that people get hot dip galvanized instead of just plate.
And put hot dip galvanizing over ourselves as well, right?
Right. I was going to say, if it does that to steel, I can only imagine what it does to the human body exposed to those elements. But Audrey, so what were your thoughts? I mean, obviously, as Brian stated, you were intense on this. You were really focused. What was the drive for you to want to go to this with Carl this year? I mean, what can you describe for us why you were so stirred to want to attend this?
I wanted to go because I'm a boots on the ground researcher like Carl, and to understand the other side, we'll say, to understand the other side, you really have to go in and see what it's all about. It's easy to sit at home, read stuff, research stuff on YouTube, whatever, and formulate opinions. But if you have an opportunity to go and actually see if your opinions are right, or see if they need correcting, or, if you have that opportunity, go. So that now you can come back and you can properly report what's going on in the world around you. And so for me, when this opportunity came up, I was ready to go. Whether we got a ticket or not, the ticketing process is horrendous and long. And sometimes you don't know if you're actually going until like a week before. But, when I took this on, I took it on as if I'm going. And so everything I did intently as if we're going. And it's a lot of work. A lot of burners take a year to plan for this. You've got to plan physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, your food, your water, everything you take in, you have to bring out as well. So what does that look like? How are you going to, what are you going to do with your garbage? What are you going to do with your water? You can't dump it on the ground. You actually have to take it out or evaporate it. So I think a big thing that people don't realize as well is, for me, I felt spiritual warfare. So this was 4 months of prep, a year's worth in 4 months for me, but I felt heavy, heavy spiritual warfare going into this. The devil does not want us there preaching the gospel. That's very clear. I felt oppressed. I was grumpy. I couldn't think at times. I couldn't sleep. Some days I didn't even eat. Like, it was intense. I can't even describe to you what I felt. The day that we jumped in the truck to actually take off to go to Burning Man, I literally felt it lift. And what a difference, from feeling the oppression to feeling, okay, it's lifted, go. That's what I felt. It's like, okay, it's okay to go.
So you guys are going together, and Carl, you guys have a camp. You had mentioned earlier there are different camps there. So you guys have, with some others every year. I think you initially went by yourself, didn't you? With just one other person the first time you went?
One other person, my friend Bob Worley, who
Right.
used to go in the mid 1990s and doing outreach at the burn when it was back in its crazy days. It's still crazy, but crazy in a different way.
Okay, so you have a specific camp there, and what is this camp? What, you guys actually have a specific name for it, because all the camps there have names. I understand it.
We're a non-registered camp, and the camp is called the Camp of the Unknown God. It would be awesome if we could get that camp registered and actually have a physical placement and be allowed to get early access tickets and early access passes. That would be amazing. The camp is literally what we can put together as the team arrives on site. And this year I was fortunate. I had an early access pass, a work access pass to help with a different project. And so I was able to find a location that was pretty good in terms of where it is on the grid. This is a city. Chad and Ian, you have to keep this in mind. This is actually a city. It has streets. It has infrastructure. It is all laid out. This is not just haphazard. And so I had to consider, and that was for me for the first 4 days before the event even started. I really was working through, okay, where do I put the camp? Because the timing of it is important. If Brian and Audrey couldn't arrive on time, if all of a sudden they got held up, let's say at the gate for 9 or 10 hours, which was my experience last year, sitting in sandstorms for hours on end while we were waiting to come in, by the time they get in, possibly the room around us is filled up and there's no room for them to be able to camp and to make this into a feasible placement. But it worked out. It all worked out. Brian and Audrey actually had a shorter wait time getting in than I did. And it all worked out. We were able to come together. We had Jen Wright, who joined us a couple of days later. So she had her tent, she added her vehicle. And then on Thursday, already quite a while into the event itself, we were joined by a young man by the name of Taylor, who does street ministry in San Diego, and he needed to come in to check out what the burn was like, while he had a team on the outside with Bob Worley doing outreach in the surrounding communities. So there's a lot of working parts. For myself, that was something I always had in my mind. It's always there. There's so many working parts to get there, to set up, and then all week long. There's a lot of working parts. You have to orient, get yourself oriented. I had the advantage of being there 4 days early, so I could do that. But Brian and Audrey had to orient themselves. It took time to do that. When Jen came, she was with us last year. She could jump in pretty quick, but even her, it takes some time to orient and reposition yourself where you are in this very large city. It's got a 9-mile perimeter. And then when Taylor came in on Thursday.
9 miles?
That's correct, yes. When Taylor came in on Thursday, then, we had to take a couple of days to get him acclimated to this location and have him trying to work through what this all looks like and how to orient yourself. It's really a big task. Honestly, for people coming for the first year, really the first week is just an orientation week. That's really what it is, because the size and the scope of the place is really beyond what people expect.
Well, I mean, that seems to make sense to me. I mean, when you have that amount of, I don't know, I guess without spirituality, I guess maybe that's the best term. When you have that vast amount of different spiritualities of people coming together in a place like that, I picture that in this. If you could picture the heavenly realm, that's got to be like a tornado. It just seems to me like a tornado. I mean, that's the only thing I can see. Ian, you got to chime in here if you have any questions, brother. If you have any questions?
No, I'm just really excited to hear about the information and the experience. Before I was born again, I didn't go to Burning Man, but I partied enough to where I went to hedonistic events. It wasn't just partying when I was in the military. I did some things that were smaller than Burning Man, but I was looking at Burning Man. So I've got a little bit of a background of understanding. I mean, I didn't realize it was 9 miles. While you were talking about that, I was actually thinking about some military bases I was in, about the size of that and how if you want to orient yourself in that first coming in to a foreign place and it's a large camp, it's like you said, it's a city, that definitely has to take quite a lot out of you to figure out what's going on and things like that. I mean, I've got some questions and stuff, but I want to, sit and listen.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I had talked to Audrey and Brian here before. I want each of them to kind of walk us through maybe some of their experience, some of the conversations they might have had that were memorable to them, that are going to stick with them. and just taking time to give each of you guys your perspective. And before I got one more question though, Will, how many days was this event over?
8 days. I was there, I think, a total of 12, but it was eight. It is eight official days. Yes.
Okay. So, Brian, Audrey, I don't wish every one of you wants to go first. Just kind of walk us through your experience, your mind, your thoughts as you were going through it. Maybe some conversations, opportunities to witness, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, the first opportunity that was actually at the border, because remember, we're in a foreign country here. We had to get into the state. So that was the first adventure. And we pull up to the border and my truck is loaded. Like every square inch is packed full. PVC tubing on the top of the monkey hut, like you name it. It's loaded. And we pull up to the border. And before that, I asked Audrey, well, what should we say? And she said, well, tell them the truth. I said, okay. So we pull up. The border guard, he can't see my license plate. So he says, well, you Albertans have a real knack of hiding your license plate. That's because our bikes were hanging off the back, right? So we couldn't see the plate. So and then he asked me where we're going, and he's in his booth there typing away, and he had our passports. He was checking us out, and I said, Burning Man. And he turned, faced me in his booth, crossed his arms, crossed his legs, double negative, and said, what in the world are you going there for? Like, and if he would have swore at us, he would have, right? He was disgusted. And he said, Burning Man is a scourge on our nation. And I'm there, yeah, I agree. So he said, why are you going? And I said, well, we're going with a researcher, an author, a friend of ours, and we're Christians, and we're going down to try to snatch some people from the flames. So that's what I told him. And then he went on and he said, well, he walked out of his booth. He looked in the back because you have to roll the window down right in the back of the truck. He looked in there and he said, this is how it usually goes. Well, I ask them where they're going, and they tell me California or Nevada. And meanwhile, their car is full of feathers, dead animals, and fur. And he says, that's where they're going, right? I think we're stupid and don't know anything, but all the Albertans and people from BC, people from Western Canada, come down that way through BC because that's the shortest route to Burning Man.
Right.
So there's a lot from Canada to go down. So then he just shakes his head. He looks in the back of the truck again for a second. He says to himself, I'm not even going to ask you any more questions. He says, go down and set them all straight. And let us
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was the first thing. And Audrey and I are looking at each other thinking, wow, that was
a God moment.
God moment, right?
So you haven't even really started. I mean, you've just begun your journey. And you're already having witnessing opportunities. Yeah. So you're not done. You're not off the hook, Brian, here, because you have 8 days, man. So you had 8 days. So your thoughts on getting oriented into the city. What was your first thoughts as you see this place?
Well, when we drove in, it was the dust storm, and we couldn't see anything. And then there, oh my goodness, this is a little worse than I thought it was going to be. But then we finally get in through everything, and we find where Carl is, and even getting through everything is an ordeal because we had to pick up our tickets. So you have to park and get out of your truck, and you're inching along miles an hour, and the wind's blowing, and of course we didn't pack our masks with us or anything. We couldn't really get to it easily, so we're thinking we're gonna die before we even get in, but luckily we made it through everything. Then you get to the welcome gate, and if you've never been before, there's greeters there. And the greeter I had was this girl, smart, in her 30s, attractive, not wearing that many clothes really. And if you're a virgin burner the first time there, they kind of encourage you to get out of your vehicle and roll around in the sand. Well, that wasn't going to happen with me because we didn't want to get dirty, right? So we gave her a hug. She gave us our books, and off we went. We finally found Carl, and we started setting up the tent. Luckily, when we did, the wind had stopped blowing, so it worked out really well. So we could set everything up. And what happened over the week was I did talk to a number of people. I talked to a lot of the people right around us, and I did tell them why we were there, and then they never talked to me after that. So I didn't really have that much success with our neighbors. But that's fine. I did have other experiences with one of them was like just a guy sitting there when we were driving by. I stopped and I went up to him and I started talking to him and I said, so you're married with 10 kids? And he said, no. He said, I don't have any kids. And I said, why not? He says, well, I'm too old. I'm 32 and I'm too old to have kids. And I'm there. I never had my first kid till I was 32. I said, you got lots of time, man. What's the problem? And, you know, so maybe that's what he needed to hear from me. Someone to tell him, look, get on with your life, move on, and you can do whatever you want. Right? Don't just sit and accept the status quo. So, and then another thing that happened after the man burned was kind of strange. So the man's burned, and after it reaches a certain level, like there's no more structure standing more than 6 feet above the ground or whatever it is, they let everybody go forward. So everyone was up at the man, and I'm standing there. I'm not right at the fire, but I'm back, and this all of a sudden you look, and this woman starts talking to me, and just out of the blue. So I talked to her. For half an hour, I talked to her. So Audrey's there, and all the other team is looking at me, saying, "What is Brian doing talking to this woman?" And she's way out of his league, you know. Like it was pretty funny.
And meanwhile, around the burn, just so you have maybe a visual, maybe you don't want this visual, you have hundreds of people marching around the burn, going around and around. Many of them, most, are disrobed as they are all moving in this big circle around the man effigy as he burns down. And that's part of the culture. So while that's going on, Audrey, Jen, and myself and Taylor, we're like watching Brian and then watching what's going on at the burn. And here's Brian talking to this woman, and we're like, okay, well, this is interesting. I wonder where it's going. So yeah.
So I told her about Act 17. I told her why we were there. You know, told her all this stuff, and it turns out she was a musician, and she was there playing in different camps, and that's what she does for a living. And you know, she was educated. And then at the end, when we were kind of done talking, she gave me her card. She said, "Here's my card. Please send me the information on your friend's book and more about what you're doing here at Burning Man." So I sent her an email a couple days ago, and I haven't heard anything back. I really don't know, but it was quite a unique experience, and it was strange, right? Just out of the blue. She approached me.
Yeah, exactly, Brian. She just came to you out of the blue. We're like, wow, okay. That only happens to Brian, it seems. That's pretty cool.
Well, I think I had heard you mention on a previous one that this is not unique for Brian, that this seems to be the way it goes for him, which is a really cool gifting to have, I guess. I mean, you just got an approachable face. That's all right. Well, Audrey, yourself, I mean, Brian couldn't have been the only one to talk to people there, I'm sure. But maybe he was. Audrey, what was it like for you? You're getting there, getting acclimated, your thoughts when you got there?
Once we got in, once we set up, once we got acclimated, Carl took us out to the deep playa, which is, it's set up like a clock. And on the bottom half of the clock is where all the city is. On the top half of the clock, there's nothing but art structures, art cars, and just openness, nothing. So that's called the deep playa. Carl took us out to the deep playa, showed us.
I thought you said deep fire. I was like, that's an interesting term. Deep, got it. I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's just this Hoosier in me. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. So the deep playa.
The art cars. He showed us what he could of the art. You'll never see everything. There's art popping up every single day. You'll never see everything that's out there. It was spectacular, amazing. We did that. Once we got situated, those first few days that Carl took us around, then it was time for, okay, really getting your head wrapped around, you have to go to workshops. What workshops do you want to go to? What are your conversations going to be like? We ended up at, in the middle of the city is something called Center Camp, that's where they sell you can buy coffee. That's one of the only things you can buy there is coffee and ice. So you can go there. Also within Center Camp, they have 2 stages. So people just get up and randomly say whatever. So I was standing there just one afternoon listening to everyone at Center Camp. And this one lady, wow, she's an elderly lady. She was in a wheelchair. This was about her 8th burn. She writes poetry and stuff. and she'd gotten up and started talking about everything that had happened to her in her life and her body since she was a little girl. And she, you could tell she went through a lot of pain, a lot of struggling, but she had finally come to the spirituality of shamanism. And through shamanism, she was doing a technique where she was reconciling with her body. So everything that had happened to her body, she was reconciling with. And I stood there and I was crying as she read the list. And I was thinking to myself, you know, you're here and you adhere to shamanism when if you just know who Jesus is, you could have that hope and that healing. And so afterwards I went down and I talked to her and offered her a hug, because that's what you do at Burning Man, is you give a hug, everyone hugs. And I just leaned over and said, I'm praying for you. I'm praying blessing over you. I'm praying for healing, and just, you know, prayed for her. And I pulled back, and you could tell that she'd already been down that road and was hurt by it. And she was polite, and she said, thank you, and she rolled away. And it just broke my heart. I could not quit crying through her testimony. I could not quit crying afterwards. That's just one example of the type of situations that we run across there. We had lots of good conversations. They were either short, some of them were as short as 2 minutes, some were as long as a half an hour, and you just go with the situation. And you're always continually trying to find the opportunities to plant seeds.
You know, as I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this team, this group of believers, you know, what qualifications do you think you had to do this, to take this on? Yeah, Carl's laughing because I was kind of talking to this before. None of us, this is the truth. None of us ever feel qualified, right? To do what we're actually doing. It's about a desire to just be available, to be a witness, to take what you have and go. When I think of the magnitude of what Burning Man is, I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That, I mean, there's enough spiritual battles just doing this show like this. I mean, on a weekly basis. You want to take this on? I mean, are you crazy? You know, and you were talking about it, but the blessing that comes from it, I see what I can see just from somebody who's now been watching from the outside. I mean, it seems to me, Carl, you can tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like you guys are, I mean, even though you've been doing this, it seems like I see a real group coming. I see the beginnings of what could be a growing ministry. Like this year, it was half a dozen people. You know, maybe next year it's a dozen people. I see this really as a movement to kind of stop being silent. Would you agree that we've been silent for too long on these kind of things, Carl?
Absolutely, we've been silent. In fact, we're scared of it. We're not just silent, we're scared of it. And there's no reason for us to be scared of it. My word, greater is he that's in you than he's that's in the world. And we have to stop living literally in fear of what the world is doing and instead be the salt and light to that world. I'm glad you brought the idea up of a larger camp. Yes, that's actually been we've been talking about that. And when we initially looked to go to the burn this year, we had, I think, up to 12 people that showed real interest in coming. Because of ticketing problems, there was only the 5 of us who were able to go. We do look to see what next year brings, and yeah, we're kind of in a discussion stage as to where this would go. We would like to make something permanent, something registered, even put up like maybe lectures, a place for discussions, and put a more solid footprint down. Hey, the Buddhists are there, the mystics are there, the people worshiping Ganesha, the Hindu deity, removing obstacles. There was 2 shrines to Ganesha that we saw. There's all kinds of things. So why not put a Christian footprint down that's even more solid than what we have right now? But in that sense, you also have to keep in mind that there's some things that's a little bit unique to this event. And when Taylor came, because I didn't know Taylor before he actually arrived on site, I had to sit down with him for a few minutes, and we had a good, hard discussion. I said, okay, a few things you need to keep in mind. Number one, you need to know the difference between finding something offensive and being personally offended. If you can't figure that out, you're in trouble. You're in serious trouble. Just going to the
Will you say
bathroom.
that again?
If you
Will you
don't
say
know
that
the
again?
difference, sure. If you don't know the difference between finding something offensive and being personally offended, you're going to be in trouble, because it's not about you. Okay, it's not about you. And you're going to see things that you will find offensive. You'll see things that you will find disturbing. Even in the bathrooms, they'll have artwork that mocks Jesus Christ. And I can show you, I've even pulled some of that out of the bathrooms and have it here in my office. So you're going to see things, and you're going to interact in ways that will be bothersome. Do you know the difference between those two? Finding it offensive and being personally offended. Secondly, can you take gifts from people that you don't even want that gift? I mean, you might not want the gift at all. It's a gifting economy. It's not buying or selling. It's not barter. It's gifting. So can you take a gift graciously that you don't want, that you will never use, that you may even find troubling? It could even be literally a handful of illicit drugs. Can you take that and then dispose of that privately, but at the same time be gracious in how you're interacting with these people? Can you accept a hug from somebody who's naked? Can you accept a hug from a naked woman? Can you accept a hug from a naked man who has just spent the last 15 minutes hitting on you and trying to pick you up? Can you diffuse the situation and then accept the fact that you will give that man a hug or that woman a hug? Can you see a beautiful woman, a sensual person, naked or clothed, doesn't matter, because you've got everything happening there. Can you see that, recognize that, yes, the person's attractive, yes, the person is beautiful, recognize that and let it go and just keep moving on? Can you do that? Or are you going to be either my eyes, or no, my eyes, or are you going to be gawking and unable to pull yourself away? No, you've got to be able to recognize and let it go and move on. These are things that people don't think about, but this is the reality at the burn. These are things that have happened to myself. Every single one of these things I've just described have happened to myself at the burn. And if you spend any amount of time, yeah, you're going to see things and have encounters that if you're not mentally, spiritually, emotionally equipped, you might be taken aback. And those are just some of the realities on the ground.
So that kind of brings me to this question. I don't know if it's one person or a group of people now. I imagine it takes a whole host of people to engineer and make this kind of a thing able to happen every year. But what do you think is the goal of the organizers there? Not maybe perhaps what they're presenting, but do you see a true intention here? And if you do, can you even put a word to it or a sentence to it? It's something that I ask myself anytime I see something like this, and any of you guys can answer that. What do you think the goal of this event is?
Growth and expansion. Growth and expansion. You already have 80 regional burns around the world. And the organization recognizes that the regionals, that's where the growth is, to expand and to build on this culture and to move it outward.
What do you think their hope in that is?
I think that what they see is that this is a model for how to engage in social change. This in itself is an action in social change. It both is a reflection of the world, but it also is leading the world. And they recognize that what happens at the burn has the ability to go deep into culture, deep into the pores and cracks of civilization.
A great quote that I found reading some articles. A great quote is, to some extent, the health of our culture can be gauged by the health of our rituals. When you go to Burning Man, you are leaving what they call the default world, and you're going home. And everyone there is a community. You have a number of different spiritualities there that all call each other, you know, brother and sister, and you're at home. And you change, you know, what you do in the default world, you don't do at Burning Man. At Burning Man, you create your own rituals. What are your own routines? What are your own thoughts even? How do you let your hair down? What things are you justifying that you're doing there that you wouldn't in the default world? Yeah, it really is home for them. And I understand that because I go to so many conferences, and they become my home as well. They become a tribe, and in tribe, they feel power. And so something they wouldn't do in the default world because their tribe is there to support them, they will now do at Burning Man. And anything you can imagine and think of is done there.
There's another couple things too I'd like to say. If I could remember what they were now, I just forgot them. But anyway, oh my goodness. But no, that's so true what Audrey said about the tribe mentality. Another thing, you have 80,000 people there. So, you know, you're pretty anonymous. You can really do whatever you want. In the smaller burns, you're not that anonymous because, especially the one we went to here in Alberta, because it's a small place. There's not that many people live there. So, you recognize some of the logos on the trucks. You recognize some of the companies. You probably even, the people that they know, you know. So there's more, they have to be a little more careful there at the smaller burns, but the big burn, anything goes. No one's going to see you. No one's going to know you. You can do whatever you want, and that really enables a lot of people to do that. So, you know, anything goes. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was, it's funny that a lot of the other religions are there, but Christianity, because where is the power? The power is in Jesus Christ. And they know that. And so they let the Hindus and the Zen and everything is there and pushed. And everything this year was all feeling. A lot of the workshops we went to was you need to feel. It wasn't standing there talking to you, trying to teach you something. It's let's get involved. Let's lay on the floor. Let's dream about this. Let's let the darkness in. Let's, and they're steering you to this feeling thing. But it's funny that all the other religions are there and all are accepted. But you bring in Jesus Christ, and there's a problem. Right away, they get their hackles up, and there's a problem. So what does that tell you? That tells you that is the true religion. That is the power, and that's where the power is. And that's what I see happening, and they're trying to spread all this false doctrine, no matter what it is. And that's why, you know what? If 1,000 Christians went to Burning Man, maybe we'd make a difference. Maybe we'd make a dent, or 5,000 people went. Right? We don't all have to be joined in the same camp. We can just go. And we actually did meet some other, well, I didn't meet them personally, I met one of them, but there is other Christians there trying to do the same thing we are, only on a different level, right? So it was quite interesting to actually see all that, and that's the observations that I've had.
Something else to keep in mind, and this is something that I explained to Taylor, because Taylor was coming at it from the perspective of his own ministry in San Diego doing street preaching. The thing I had to remind him was, look, when you're in San Diego or wherever you may be, that's the mundane world. People are coming to and from work. They're going shopping. They're going to school. It is the mundane. They do this every day, in and out. It's the normal world. Burning Man, that's not happening. It's not the mundane. It's the extraordinary. It is a place of excitement. It's a place of ecstasy. It's a place of energy. It's a place of constant exploration, and people finding and hoping to feel that they are, in a sense, living their utopia, even if it is just for a short time. They are living in that extraordinary setting. So it is very different than putting boots on the ground, let's say, in your hometown. There is something different about it. And so you have to take an approach that's almost as more artistic. Certainly take the approach more relationally. People want to talk. People want to openly discuss. Jen had the opportunity, this is kind of a weird story, opportunity to talk to what more or less is the Henry Kissinger of the movement. And it happened because a bat had flown up into the fly of her tent. It was kind of crazy. We had a dust storm that rolled in. It blew a bat in from somewhere off the mountains that surround Burning Man. Because out in the playa, there's nothing. I mean, it's a dead zone. It literally is a dead zone. And so this poor little bat ended up stuck between her tent and the flyover tent. And so she took a picture of it. Following day, she's at a workshop on psychedelics, ends up sitting beside this guy. They start talking. She showed him a picture of the bat. It opened up a conversation. She explained what our camp was all about, the camp of the unknown God. He said he believed in the cosmic Christ. She said that's the Antichrist. He had real troubles with that. In fact, so much trouble that it caused him for a night or two to really lose sleep as he was worrying and wondering about this. He had invited Jen and myself, because at one point I stepped in the conversation. He invited Jen and myself to come back and have a far deeper, longer conversation. So on Saturday, we went to his camp, entered into his space, and for 2 hours ended up having a very intense but really good conversation about who is Jesus Christ versus the cosmic Christ. And at the end of it, he took a copy of my book, and hopefully we'll hear back from him.
And you said this was not just really a nobody either, right?
No. This guy is like one of the Mr. Kissingers of this world. Yeah.
Explain what you mean by Kissinger of this world.
Somebody who is deeply connected within, who has been involved in organizing events like this, who has been absolutely embedded within this culture at a leadership level for a very long period of time, kind of a guiding light. And indeed, this was his 23rd burn.
23rd. How many years have this been going on?
Since 1986.
And it started out with how many people, Carl?
Just a handful of guys. Larry Harvey and a couple of friends. Larry had been reading, and there's, by the way, there's different and conflicting creation stories to how this event developed. But the bottom line was Larry Harvey and a bunch of guys, not a bunch, pardon me, a handful of guys went down to the beach in San Francisco. They went down to Baker Beach during the summer solstice, hammered together a human effigy about 8 feet tall. It didn't look like much. Threw gasoline on it at the sunset, lit her up, had some beers. Hooray! End of story. But they admitted this had a ritualistic feel. It had a sense of making you feel like something's happening, like you're coming together. So the following year, they did it again. More people showed up. I believe it was by 1990, the Cacophony Society, which is a guerrilla theater group in San Francisco, they had already caught wind of it a couple of years before, but by 1990, up to 600 people were showing up at the beach, and that was the year the cops show up. And the cops basically said, look, you guys don't have a permit. You can't do this. And so, of course, bureaucracy rules. So they said, hey, we know a spot out in the Nevada desert where there is nobody. It's a dead zone, this massive alkali desert that's many, many miles wide and 150 miles long. It's just an enormous expanse of space. We'll go out there. So they drew a line in the sand, said on this side, basically anything can happen. It's a new world. Stepped over the line, and the rest is history. By 1995, 10,000 people were there. By the year 2000, you had the creation of the first temple on site. And it's been sitting at 70,000 people for the last 3 or 4 years, really 80,000 because you have 10,000 volunteers that work within the city that aren't counted as ticket holders because they are already volunteering on site, building the infrastructure and keeping things running.
Yeah,
and by the way, back to Ian, when you talked about military, how large military bases can be, this place actually has its own temporary FAA-approved airport. And all week long, you see helicopters flying in, you see private planes, you see executive planes coming in. Multiple times during the week, I watched as Chinooks were circling us. And you do see military helicopters circling quite frequently. And then over the course of the week, we got buzzed by military aircraft as they use that valley for training exercises.
That's incredible. I think to put it in perspective for myself, I know like the stadium downtown here in Indianapolis holds 60,000. So add 10 to 20,000 more to that, and that many people going out into the desert at the same time for this, I think it's incredible. I think it really, I mean, this is probably, you say they only offer so many tickets. How much, let me just ask this. What do the tickets to attend this event go for?
Basically, the bottom line tickets are for $4.25 US a pop. Remember, we're Canadians. That's why we refer to the US, because we're like the US dollars. you spend way more as a Canadian with our lousy dollar compared to the American dollar. And then it goes all the way up to $1,400 US. By the way, the $1,400 ticket doesn't get you any more or any less than the $4.25 ticket. You can get low income tickets. You've got to prove low income, that you actually fit their criteria. And there's quite a bit of information you have to divulge for that, but the bulk of the tickets are between $4.25 to $1,400.
As far as expenditures to stay there for a week for one person, if you're at it, the reason I'm bringing this up is because as I was talking before we went on the air tonight with Audrey and Brian, is I think at least my experience has been with people who are saying, I want to be faithful with what I do, but I don't know how to begin. I don't feel qualified, kind of like the earlier question began. How do I get involved? So perhaps there's somebody who has watching now or who will watch this in the future and says, you know what? This sounds like something that I would like to be a part of. How do they get a hold of you guys? Any of you? How did they get a hold of any of you? I wanted them to know, kind of get an idea or understanding of what the costs are involved personally on this, the nuts and bolts of this. And then how would they go about reaching out and being involved with this? How does someone go about doing this? Audrey, Brian, Carl?
Well, basically, you need to watch a bunch of YouTube and see if it's something actually you want to do. You can't answer the questions that Carl said earlier, like, you know, if you got a naked guy hugging you, you can't freak out and punch him, right? You understand where they're at. You're in enemy territory. You need to, you know, blend in and you know, snipe your opportunities like a sniper does. You need to talk to someone, feel them out. You know, you have to be willing to do that. You can't go in and beat them over the head with the Bible. That's not going to work because you are on their territory. They aren't there to hear that. They will shun you and throw you away. You need a personal relationship. So, you know, if you can do that, then that's great. And just watch a bunch of YouTube videos on how to prepare. There's lots of stuff. There's Facebook groups you can join, burner hacks or whatever, and they will, you know, you can ask questions on there and they'll fill you in. Basically, you need a tent, you need a shade structure. You know, it costs several $100s to really get ready. You can go super cheap, well, thousands of dollars, yeah, but our money's not worth as much, so a couple thousand here, you know, 200 there. But it does cost money, and you need to get there. You need to bring in all your own water, and you need to take all your garbage out and your gray water. You can let some evaporate, but you know, everything you go in with, you need to take out. So it is a big undertaking. There is a lot to learn.
Do you see yourselves going next year?
I do. I think if people really want to go, they have to get over the cool factor of going to Burning Man. It's anything but cool, literally and figuratively. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of work before you go. There's a lot of work when you're there, and there's a lot when you get home. And people underestimate the power of the dust out there, and how hot it is. And yeah, literally, you can die out there. And I'm not exaggerating. You can die out there. This isn't just, you know, you're going camping in the bush for a week. That's not the mentality you need to go in with. You need a lot of prayer. You need a lot of support. It's hard on you emotionally. It's hard on you spiritually. Yeah, you can go and have fun. The fun's there. But, you know, as a Camp of the Unknown God, we went there to show compassion to those who are searching, who are hurting, who are following another spirituality in the hopes of achieving the very goals that Jesus Christ offers, that Jesus Christ has. And, you know, it's hard to see kids there. It's hard to see kids walking, you know, their parents are nude and there's a kid between them. And that's the reality there. If you
And then
can,
kids handing out little Soviet Union stickers.
yeah. I got one of those stickers actually, and I got off my bike and I gave him a hug. I just gave him a hug and silently prayed for him. I mean, that's what you do. That's why you're there. There it is.
You do.
Hold that up closer, Carl. Hold that up to
Sure.
the camera closer.
Yeah, you do a lot of praying there. Actually, Taylor and I were out one night, and we saw a guy that was passed out on the ground, and 2 rangers were there looking after him. So Taylor and I prayed. We just prayed for him. Lord, please help this person right now. Do, whatever you can. In Jesus' name, heal him, whatever. And as soon as we finished praying, the guy rolls over and throws up, right? So I don't know if that God helped him do that. I really don't know if we had an effect or not, right? But we did what Christians do, and we prayed. And that's really all we could do. There was people that were attending to him, but, that happens there, and you're going to see that kind of thing.
Chad, quickly back to your question about preparation. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. Read chapter 14 of my book, because it is the only Christian perspective of this movement from a broader cultural context. You're not gonna find the information anywhere else. So yeah, check it out. Game of Gods, Temple of Man, and the Age of Reenchantment, because there is nothing else like this within the Christian community that tackles it from its larger cultural context. In terms of just costs and all the physical things that are needed, okay, looking at, by the time your taxes, your fees, and your vehicle passes are purchased, because you have to purchase separate vehicle passes. By the time that's done, you're looking at shelling out about $600 to $650. That's just for the ticket to get in, okay? Then you got to get all your own water. You have to bring in all your own food. You can have a tent or some other shade structure. My tent lasted over the last 3 years, 27 days in that environment, and now I've tossed it. I threw my $400 tent away because it was absolutely shredded and done. You're going to throw a bunch of your clothes away. You're going to throw your boots away. You're going to bring extra air filters and cab filters for your vehicle, and you want to dump the oil right away. Your vehicle itself is going to take a beating. It's going to take a significant beating. Everything that you take there, including camera gear, will potentially come back ruined. So you have to keep all that in mind. There are literally is a lot of things that you will end up having to either build upon or throw away or rebuild. There's just a lot of stuff to think about when you go. This is not a small endeavor. Hey, I've been to 35, 40, maybe more different kind of world change events, from UN events, World Federalist events, interfaith events. All of them require some amount of prep work. But in terms of all the events I've been to, this one takes the cake. There is nothing quite like it. You will have to prepare and over-prepare. And sometimes actually that's a detriment, over-preparing, because I did that the first year. Second year I took less. This year I took almost too little in terms of some of the essentials.
You're also living out of Ziploc bags too. Everything that you bring, you put in a Ziploc bag, including your outfits, like your clothes. You plan your outfits per day, and each outfit's in a plastic bag. So you don't just come with 10 t-shirts together. No, it's t-shirt, shorts, like whatever, and it's in Ziploc bags. That's how you know. If you don't, it's all ruined with dust immediately. It's incredible. Yeah. So can you live out of Ziploc bags? Like, really, can you? That's hard.
And can you live with heat? By 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, the heat's already waking you up in your tent. By 10:30 in the morning, my deodorant stick was already melted.
I think Ian had a comment or a question he wanted to ask.
Well, yeah, actually, it's one of the questions in the comment section here, but it's actually, the same thing I was wondering. You guys are talking a lot about the physical preparation, the mental preparation, even the emotional preparation. And I completely understand you don't want to have anybody, it's not that you're trying to discourage, but you don't want anybody just going into it not having the right idea, not being planned. A lot of what you guys are talking about reminds me of military training. You want to talk about sand. I spent two tours in Iraq. I know exactly what you're talking about with sand getting into everything. I know exactly what you're talking about with the heat. I know exactly what you're talking about with the Ziploc bags, everything like that. We could talk about that for a minute. But one of the things I was really curious about which is also in the comments here, is about the spiritual text. I mean, we're talking about this eclectic hodgepodge collection of all these different faiths. What have you guys encountered for yourselves personally on the spiritual text while you're there, leading up to, afterwards, things of that matter?
Yeah, I already mentioned the spiritual tact that I felt preparing for the 4 months leading up to it. I know that in other years that I know Carl's felt, I know that Jen has felt as well. Maybe Carl, you can explain some of yours.
Yeah, even the prep work in terms of spiritual prep work. And number one, you have to know why you're going. You have to know where you personally stand and why you're going. Okay, that's big right there in and of itself. Recognizing that you're going into a hostile place, potentially hostile. I've had really good encounters, and I've had some that were like, whatever. But you potentially run the gamut of what's out there. Prayer. I'm very thankful I've got a loving, supporting wife. So thankful for my wife. If it wasn't for Leanne backing me up with what I would be doing, what I'm doing, I wouldn't be going. That's simple. So having that support is really, really important. One of the questions I need to throw out to everybody, though, is how do you manage on a day-to-day basis? Because honestly, this worldview, it's all around you. This kind of reality is all around you. The burn just simply reflects what the culture already is doing. So if you want to go experience this, go talk to your neighbors. Go spend some time downtown, and you're going to see it all around you. So how do you prepare? That's a great question.
You must be reading my notebook or something.
Sorry, Chad. No, I got no notebook.
No, you're reading my notebook because that's exactly the thought on my mind. What I was going to lead off with. I was talking about this in a general and a specific sense where the celebration is occurring. But the truth is, this is your neighbor. This is what's all around us. This is, what should we be doing with our lives anyway? It should be this. So, and this is going to sound more harsh probably than what it is if you cannot talk to your neighbor about Jesus, if you're struggling there, you can't go to Burning Man. You can't go to any of these events. So maybe it's an opportunity, if you're hearing this, kind of some self-assessment kind of thing. And then the question that I want to leave with everybody here tonight, because we're actually out of time here tonight, is what are you doing with whatever gift you're giving? This is a question that we're asking on Disputed Lands every week. This platform is an opportunity both to share with Brian/Kevin, Audrey,
Thanks.
and Carl, about what they have been driven to do with their faith. And it seems like a huge thing. But for each of them, for each of us, this platform here is just about sharing those things, but everybody has a platform. Maybe it's not in front of a camera. The question you're asking yourself, are you preparing? To Ian's point, a military campaign, we are at war. There is a spiritual war taking place. What one thing can you do today or do tomorrow in your walk with purpose? With a purpose is today I'm setting out, I'm preparing, I'm being ready, I'm making myself available. I have this gift, this desire that the Father's placed within me. Is it being used? What's keeping me from using it? What's keeping me from being obedient to the Father in this? Insert, there. What's stopping you? What is stopping you? That's a question each of us have to ask ourselves every day. Has this day been given to the Lord? He is in it. He said he's rejoiced, be glad. Now go forward and do something. If you want to be involved with Carl, Audrey, with Brian, if you want to, you can reach out to them. If you don't have them as friends on Facebook, reach out to them. If you want into Brian and Audrey, you can go to remnantonlinefellowship.org. I put it on the thing here earlier. They have a host of speakers whom they trust that you can get questions directly to these people. You can find out about all the conferences that are going out throughout the year, not just the ones you've heard about because you only watch certain channels. You can go there. Carl has a mountain of work, not just this book, which is a phenomenal book that I've gotten to read pre-edited versions of, so far. He's got this book, but he has mountains of other research that he has available there to read about all of this. The question is, what are you going to do with it? You've heard this testimony, you've heard these guys witness. What are you going to do now? Are you going to be idle? Are you going to reach out? Are you going to reach out, take that step, and reach out to somebody? We have hosts of other people, very gifted people. We got the Holy Hand Grenade here in the chat. Ian Chadrick, been a host on this show. Does his work inspire you, the things that he's done? Would you like to know how to be a part of that? Reach out to Ian. He's available. He'll talk to you. Anyway, this has been Disputed Lands, talking about one of the biggest disputed lands going on annually every year in America, called the Burning Man event. I'm glad you guys could join us. Thanks for being here. This is Take on the World TV. Until we see you again next week, shalom, and we'll talk to you later.